Hello, you beautiful people! So, we finally got the complete info on Tribbie's kit, and I'm very confident you're here because you want to know all the details related to her kit and whether she'll be a good support or not, right? Well, in any case, you've landed on the right video, or may I say the perfect video to get that info. Today, we're basically going to discuss Tribbie's entire kit in detail, including all of her basic abilities, her talent, her traces, her light cone, and last but not least, her eidolons as well. Along with all this, we'll also take a look at the characters who will synergize perfectly with Tribbie's kit, and just a heads up, if you're pulling for Madame Herta in patch 3.0, you might want to start saving for Tribbie next. Before we go on though, if you're planning to pull for the Herta or the rerunning units in version 3.0, you might want to check out Lubar because on this site, you can save up to a total of 23% on all your purchases. Just as an example, I'll buy this 3280 Oniric Shard pack for $43, and this same pack costs me about $50 from the in-game shop. You can see that it's cheaper, right? The top-up process is honestly really easy as well because all you need to do is enter your UID in this box and choose your respective server depending on your account. After waiting for a few minutes, I received my Jades with the double top-up bonus because it was my first purchase and saved a decent amount of money. Also, other than HSR, you can top up on Genshin as well using Lubar, and both of these games have quite a lot of 5-star reviews. Lastly, if you use my link which is in the description or the pinned comment, you can get an extra 8% off on top of all the other discounts, so do keep that in mind. Anyways, with the sponsor done, I'm just going to mention the usual disclaimer that this version of Tribbie's kit is in its first iteration, and it will most likely go through many changes in the upcoming weeks, so do keep that in the back of your mind. With that being said, let's begin without wasting any more of your time or energy. Okay, starting with the very basics as usual, Tribbie is going to be a quantum type unit who follows the path of harmony, and she has a somewhat different way of displaying her harmony abilities, because she supports your team by dealing damage to the enemies using her follow-up attacks. Basically, Tribbie is going to be like a hybrid between a DPS and a harmony unit, where she'll provide some amazing buffs to all of your teammates, while also dealing a huge amount of damage on the side through her talent and her follow-up attacks. Other than this, she'll be our first support who purely scales on HP rather than attack or crit damage, so you might want to start farming those crit and HP pieces in the new cavern because, as I said before, the damage that she deals is actually pretty insane for a support. Lastly, regarding her release date, Tribbie will be featured in the first half of patch 3.1, and her banner will go live on February 26th for the Asia servers and February 25th for the America servers. Alright, with that section or the basics being done, let's move on and take a look at her kit in detail. So, starting very simple with her basic attack, Tribbie's basic, unlike most basics, is actually quite special. Yep, I'm saying this because instead of dealing a single instance of damage to a single target, Tribbie's basic deals quantum damage equal to 30% of her max HP to one enemy and 15% of her max HP to the adjacent enemies. Basically, Tribbie has a blast-type basic similar to Jade, which is especially good for her synergy with the Herta because this means that Tribbie's basic generates bonus stacks for Herta's talent. All in all, you only need to use Tribbie's skill like once in 3 turns, and this means that you're simply going to use her basic attack most of the times to generate some extra stacks for the Herta, which makes her basic more useful than most of the other basic attacks. Next up, discussing a very important part of her kit, Tribbie's skill is actually quite broken because upon being used, it provides resistance penetration to the entire team for a total of 3 turns. Yep, we all know from Robin's first Eidolon and Wanmei's ultimate that resistance penetration is one of the strongest buffs in this game, right? Well, Tribbie having this resistance penetration buff simply built in her skill, rather than being locked behind an Eidolon or an ultimate kind of goes to show you how broken this character really is. Also, just like Wanmei's skill, Tribbie's skill has the great utility of ticking down on her own turns instead of her ally's turn, and because Tribbie is a very slow harmony type unit, this means that she'll have a really good and almost 100% uptime on her skill. Moving on from her skill, Tribbie's ultimate is definitely quite a lot to take in, so I'll try to simplify it for you guys because that's what I'm here for. Firstly, whenever Tribbie uses her ultimate, she deals a decent amount of AoE quantum damage to all the enemies present on the field, and this damage scales off her max HP just like all of her other abilities. Now, other than dealing damage, her ultimate also creates a zone on the field somewhat similar to Ruan Mei's ultimate, and after an ally attacks an enemy while they're in this zone, Tribbie will do an instance of damage to this particular enemy. Essentially, her ultimate quite literally works like a premium version of Robin because even though Tribbie's scalings aren't as good as Robin's, what makes her different is that Tribbie deals more or bonus instances of damage depending on the amount of targets that your ally attacked. To explain this point further, I want you to imagine a scenario where your main DPS attacked a total of 3 targets when they used their skill or their ultimate, okay? Now, in this kind of scenario, Tribbie literally triples her own instances of damage, making this insanely strong and synergistic with AoE characters. Also, this damage from her ultimate zone is considered or counted as additional damage which scales off her max HP, and she can also use the new planar set which buffs her HP and her damage, making her deal even more damage than she already does. Lastly, for some reason, being a significantly better Robin-type damage dealer was not enough, so they even added an additional part to her ultimate, which makes it even more insane. So, this part says that whenever Tribbie's ultimate zone is active on the field, all the enemies take 30% more damage, and honestly, I don't think I need to explain how good this is, right? It literally applies for everyone on the team unconditionally, meaning that you basically have a 1.3 times multiplier on your damage. Well, with that, we're done discussing her ultimate and moving on. Let's take a look at her talent next. So, her talent is actually really simple, and it says that whenever an ally on your team uses their respective ultimate, Tribbie will fire off a follow-up attack dealing damage to all the enemies on the field, and this damage scales off her max HP. Her talent is pretty good and synergistic with follow-up based teams, and it's generally really nice as it just procs her additional damage from her ultimate for free, while also doing a decent amount of quantum damage. Lastly, as for her technique, it's very similar to Ruan Mei's technique and basically says that upon being used, Tribbie automatically uses her skill at the very start of the battle, and this use of the skill does not consume any skill points. Overall, a pretty good technique utility-wise, and also makes it so that Tribbie has a 100% uptime on her skill from the very start. With that though, we're pretty much done discussing Tribbie's base kit in detail. Moving on, let's take a look at all of her major traces before discussing her light cone and all that. Honestly, I have to say, Tribbie's traces are insanely strong, and I'm putting it lightly as I could say they are some of the best traces that we have in the entire game, which makes it kind of funny considering that these traces are for a harmony unit. Alright, starting with her first trace, it pretty much grants her 48 energy at the start of the battle, and that's it. This trace is quite decent by itself, but it becomes kind of insane when you pair it up with her light cone, because it allows her to use her ultimate as soon as the battle starts, basically letting her have a 100% uptime on her ultimate zone. Next up, taking a look at her second trace, it's very simple and very unique at the same time as it increases her max HP equal to 9% of the entire team's max HP combined. This trace can easily get Tribbie around 1200 extra HP for doing essentially nothing, which not only increases her damage, but also makes her a bit tankier. Other than that, this trace will synergize even better with future HP scaling characters as there is no cap or maximum limit to the amount of HP that she can convert with this trace. Basically, if you have a super tanky character like Maide, this trace will boost Tribbie's max HP by an insane amount. Finally, her last trace is probably the strongest DPS trace in the entire game because it literally increases the damage dealt by Tribbie by a total of 72% after her follow-up attack is used for 3 turns. This is actually an insane amount of bonus damage for doing essentially nothing but wait, I haven't even told you the entire trace effect yet. So, I just said that she gains a 72% damage bonus for literally doing nothing, right? Well, along with that, Tribbie can stack up this damage boost for a total of 3 times, which grants her around 216% bonus damage, and yes, you heard that right. I said a 216% damage bonus for doing literally nothing. Just to put it into perspective, this is equivalent to having a total of 5.5 quantum orbs worth of damage bonus, so when I say Tribbie does damage, you now know that she does put the harm in harmony. Moving on to the last section, her light cone is also really good, and just like her damage, it hits really hard on the damage increase aspect as it essentially says that whenever your team does a ton of attacks, Tribbie generates stacks, and these stacks are converted into extra crit damage and extra energy whenever the wearer uses their respective ultimate. Now, when you're at max 60 stacks, her light cone will grant a total of 60% crit damage and extra 30 energy to the wearer. Also, since Tribbie can use her ultimate as soon as she enters a battle, this light cone will give her the full stacks at the very start due to this passive effect. Anyways, with that, we've covered Tribbie's entire kit in detail, and I hope you understood my explanations. Honestly, her kit is actually insane for pretty much all the DPS units and teams out there, but she especially synergizes with AoE and follow-up teams like the Herda and Fei Xiao. I'm curious though, how do you guys feel about her kit? Also, if you watched until the end, you might want to consider subscribing as well. With that being said, I love y'all and I'll see you in another one.